For our final episode of our Should I Shut Down series, we are on part 7. Today we're going to talk about what we are actually going to do during the shutdown phase. So obviously we're not throwing, we need to be doing something to improve ourselves. What is that, and what does the plan look like for those 6 to 8 weeks? So obviously some of these time periods will change depending on how far or how much time you have off. But again, we're kind of going off of the idea that you're going to have somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks off of throwing completely. And this is how we program our guys and what we look at doing during that time. So first and foremost, we need to lift. Something where if we're not taking this time to really build muscle mass, you're wasting a really good opportunity. There are very few times in the season, especially in Florida high school baseball, which is the majority of our clientele, which we can really get after in the weight room and really work on building muscle in as far as like hypertrophy phase and really increase the volume. And this is one of those time periods. So we want to take full advantage of that. Most of our guys, again, between 15, 18, 19 years old, guys are still developing, guys that need to gain weight, need to gain muscle mass. So a few things. One, we don't have the strain of throwing on the body, so it's training economy that we can then put into more lifting. And two, we have the time. It takes somewhere probably around 30 minutes a day to go through your whole throwing routine, maybe an hour for a more extensive throwing day. And now we have that time to put back in the weight room if that's something that we choose to do. Now we're not going to have 90-minute, 2-hour lifts, but it's time where they can do schoolwork, do extra recovery modalities, spend time with range of motion training, those sort of things, on top of what they would normally be able to do with having to throw. The other thing that we're going to look at would be to attack movement deficits and really dive in if there's a lack of range of motion somewhere, or we see something like thoracic rotation, which is really lacking, and we can be more aggressive in treating that. Using something like a pail and rail is not something we want to do in season, where we're going to be really taxing the nervous system and teaching the body a new range of motion, say hip internal rotation on the lead leg, and then they're going to go out and pitch the next day. We don't want to have that type of the body having to adjust to those new ranges of motion and go through that type of stress. As far as the CNS goes, the central nervous system, the day before they have to go throw. So we're going to try to table that and more attack it as the off season begins, more specifically during that shutdown period, so that we can try to be more aggressive there and make those changes earlier on and then build off those changes as the programs progress. We want to also focus on building tissue capacity overhead. Went over this a little bit as far as the idea of tissue capacity in one of our previous videos, so check the YouTube page out for that, with the role of physical therapists and how injuries come about. But in a general sense, when we look at tissue capacity, if the tissue capacity is less than the demand of the sport or the demand of the motion, then obviously over time it'll wear down, it'll break. So we want to build that tissue capacity overhead. Again, if we're throwing all the time and we're doing that overhead motion, that takes up most of our training economy with our shoulder, with our scapula and the movements there. This is a time where we can work on actually lifting overhead in a more strenuous fashion. We can work on like overhead carries with medicine balls, plates. We can work on hangs, just anything that we can do to build tissue capacity up above our head. And some of that may also be range of motion issues, lack of internal rotation, and or lack of external rotation wherever it is, or restoring in-range strength in those motions. So really want to work on obviously building as much capacity overhead during that time as possible. One thing that we're going to stay away from for the first part of the shutdown is overhead throw. So think like a med ball overhead throw, some type of like soccer motion throw. We're going to stay away from that, and we're going to stay away from shot put throws for the first 2 to 4 weeks. If we're taking a break from like aggressive overhead throwing, like we would with throwing baseball, then we also want to limit some of these lighter, faster, more aggressive movements. So with the shot put, it's not overhead. But as we're doing extending the elbow, we're getting a very rapid elbow extension, which is similar to what we do when we throw a baseball. So just to kind of steer clear of this, it's 2 to 4 weeks a year. We can figure out something else to do during that time period besides a shot put throw, and really stay away from taking a break from that. Kyle Bodie pointed that out, or one of the guys from Driveline, about staying away from shot put throws because of the rapid elbow extension that you're going to have in those. And I think it's a really good point that we don't want to take away one way that we rapidly extend the elbow just to add in another way. So we stay away from those. It's either 2 to 4 weeks. As we get down more into this dynamic section, we'll start adding some of those back in to work back towards overhead throwing and building in the ramp up period. So that takes us down to our 6 to 8 week breakdown of, this would be only a direct shoulder work when we're talking about this breakdown right here. So first 2 weeks, we're going to stay away from, we'll call it direct shoulder work, but this is where we talk about whether it's bands, wrist weights, shoulder tube, some type of sideline, external rotation, posterior shoulder work, rotator cuff, anything like that, low trap work. Back to our conversation last week, we want to give the guys a mental break from these things. We don't want to have them doing the same little things they're doing all year round. So having a little bit of a break there gives them the opportunity to mentally reset and not have to worry about those things. And then we can go back to the whole lifting part, focus a little bit more on the main lifts and really building muscle there. And then just give the body a time to kind of naturally heal itself without a ton of direct stimulus into that area. And again, every time you throw a baseball, you're creating micro tears in those muscle groups. So if we can give them a little time to just let the body heal naturally, that's a good thing. So depending on your time off, it's a minor leaguer, this might be more like a month, but we don't have that luxury for high school baseball players, so we're going to say about 2 weeks for that. For the next 2 to 3 weeks, again, depending on 6 to 8 weeks, we're going to focus on eccentric. That's what ECC stands for. Strength, more overload. So if you think like manual resistance, where someone's really pushing down and you're going slow, or something that's like a little bit more of like a 8-pound weight on the sideline external rotation, where they're just focusing on controlling the motion down, and then something's assisting them back up or through the concentric range of motion. We can't do this a lot throughout the year for throwing. Again, we're going to really fatigue those muscle groups, and we don't want to really fatigue those muscle groups if they have to go throw a bullpen the next day. We're just going to keep wearing them down and down and down, and through chronic stress, they're going to increase the chance of injury. So we're going to take this time when they don't have those other overhead demands, just like we talked about with these other areas, and we are going to focus on building the eccentric strength in those muscles. For the last 2 to 3 weeks, we'll become more dynamic in nature with those. So that's where we would come down and say, all right, we're going to start implementing some overhead throws back in. We're going to start putting some shot put throws back in. We're going to start working on something like a wall dribble with a medicine ball, where it'd be more dynamic. Anything like that would be great, so that we can start preparing the arm to move dynamically. We're going to do this in 3 planes of motion as well, and work more from like a 1 plane down to a 3 plane, just like we would with most of all of our lifts, and worry about strengthening the 3 planes of motion here, because when we start moving it and actually throwing again, we're going to be moving in 3 planes of motion, so it becomes a little bit more specific in the training there. So again, more dynamic and making them adjust constantly, and then we'll start taking out some of like the heavier aggressive upper body stuff that we're trying to do with them, and the volume will start going down a little bit as this period wraps up and we get into actually starting on ramp and throw again. So that gives you a little bit of an outline. It's pretty vague. We could go into probably a ton more detail and spend a couple videos on each single week, but this gives you an idea about what you should look for and kind of how we want to progress, so you're getting a little bit of everything throughout those 8 weeks, and you're able to advance your strength and your, it's a little bit overplayed, but your baseball specific training for that time period. We've had very good success with this from the aspect of when our pitchers go through this, or our baseball players go through this program, day one, when they pick up a baseball again, they're able to throw it somewhere around 120 feet lightly, and they feel very both refreshed and like they actually haven't shut down. So that's one of my big goals with doing a program like this, is that the first day back when I just shut down and just lifted throughout the shutdown period when I played, is the first day back I felt like I was being stabbed with needles in the shoulder because I hadn't done enough to get my arm prepared to then move again in the throwing motion. By going through some type of program that's shaped like this, the body is prepared to throw a baseball again, so the ramp up period can decrease, and we don't have to worry about guys taking as long to get back into throwing long toss, or having that pain or discomfort or unfamiliarity with the motion that might happen if you just do nothing. So we really encourage you to follow something like this. It'll make the on-ramping period much easier to deal with, and that's when we can really start building faster, and gives you an opportunity to shut down a little bit longer, where you're not just wasting away. So if you need more specifics on this, as always, please email us, call us, send us a DM, leave a comment. We'll be happy to answer specific questions for you guys. And if you have anything else that we could go into more specifics with shutdown period or anything related to that, we'd love to do some more videos. So let us know. We're here to help any way we can.